I never would have thought that I would see a cow eating dragon fruit, but I've seen it.
In the last year, we've fed approximately 50,000 tons of French fries, which is a number that kind of blows my mind.
It's perfectly edible food that for one reason or another, consumers don't like the look of it.
Today, there is no limit to our food options. We can get it fresh, frozen, drive-through, delivered right to our door, diet-specific, and from every cuisine around the globe. Food has the capacity to sustain lives and lift nations out of poverty. It can heal the sick, add joy to our days, and build memories, connections, and traditions. So why are we letting so much of it go to waste? In Canada, 58% of the food we produce is lost or wasted every single year, with the majority of our food waste ending up in a landfill, along with all the resources it took to produce it. When that food rots in a landfill, it produces as much as 20% of Canada's methane emissions. Our global population will grow to 9 billion people over the next 50 years, and we'll need to feed that population using the same or fewer resources than before. So how do we, as individuals, play a role in creating food security and sustainability for ourselves and for future generations? Dr. Robin White, an assistant professor of animal and poultry sciences, has published research on the role of ruminant animals in North America's food systems.
Our current agricultural system fails to meet the needs of our current population on a global scale. We have documented challenges of hunger both in developed and developing countries. This challenge of food distribution and food equity, those are major issues, as is this issue of food waste.
The issue of an equitable food system is going to take a global approach, but food waste is something we can all actively change and improve. Let's take a look at where waste happens in our food chain. Food loss occurs before the food reaches the consumer as a result of issues in the production, storage, processing, and distribution phases. Food waste refers to food that is fit for consumption but gets discarded at the retail or consumption phases. In other words, everything we do to reduce food loss and food waste leads to less pressure on the planet, greater economic opportunities, and more food available to everyone.
We're not trying to just do one thing. We're not trying to just meet the energy requirements of the entire global population, or just meet the protein requirements of that population, or just focus on reducing environmental impact, right? We have to simultaneously accomplish all of these objectives. The system within which we grow food is complex, and the human biology, which we are trying to sustain, is equally complex. We need to embrace the complexity, because within that complexity is where there's tremendous opportunity.
It is said that the highest value of food is maintained when it's consumed by humans. So in Canada, we use something called the food recovery hierarchy to help prioritize different actions that organizations can take to prevent food from being wasted. While this often involves working in partnership with local food banks, it can also mean embracing and building on concepts like upcycling, such as using low-valued foods or food processing byproducts to generate new food products like animal feed.
We have a deal with a wholesaler, and this is their produce that, for one reason or another, doesn't make it to the grocery store. We've been getting between 25 and 50 tons a week. There's everything in there. There's peppers, there's fruit and vegetables, and mostly potatoes, probably 80% potatoes, which have been fed to cattle for years. We're doing our little bit to make sure it's not actually wasted.
Like many Canadians, you probably had no idea that farmers and ranchers like Bob upcycle food waste as high-quality feed for cattle.
Historically, feedlots started up because they saw that there was a need to take ingredients that weren't making it into the human food chain, and they could be repurposed and fed to cattle, upcycled to make protein.
Ruminant animals can take feed products, which humans either cannot or will not consume, and convert typically, fibrous or high carbohydrate feeds into this really high quality human edible source of protein and micronutrients. That's a really exciting place for ruminant animals in this challenge of feeding the growing global population.
Beer production is an industry that significantly reduces its environmental impact by diverting food loss and waste to livestock. Over 75% of the malt barley grown each year fails to meet the quality criteria for beer making, but can be used for cattle feed. What would otherwise be considered as food loss and sent to a landfill is instead turned into a feed source. On the other end of beer production, the malt barley that does make the cut to be used to make beer isn't used up completely. After beer has been produced, the byproduct from the brewing process is a mash mainly made up of malt barley grain husks and seeds.
The grains that we use are typically malted barley, but we do use a host of other malts and grains. It's going into our system where we get to extract the sugars that we need to feed our yeast for fermentation. Once we're done with that, there's still a lot of feed value left in the grain, but it's not something that we can use, so we take it out and then give it to local farmers.
This mash, called brewer's spent grain, makes up 85% of all waste from beer production. Fortunately for breweries and beef farmers alike, brewer's spent grain is a nutritious feedstuff for cattle. Just one brewery in Alberta estimates they produce around 5,000 kilograms of brewer's spent grain per week that is then fed to local cattle as part of a high-quality diet. This is just one example of many of how cattle take low-quality protein that is inedible to humans and transform it into high-quality protein for human consumption.
In the last 10 years, we've developed relationships with a couple of the French fry plants in the Lethbridge area. Quite often it's potato peelings, it is like a potato mash that comes out of the plant, and often it's just straight French fries or hash browns or something like that. So we feed it in a balanced ration. We work with our nutritionists to make sure that it meets all the standards for high quality feed for animals. The cattle performance is excellent with it, the health is great, and it's a really cost-effective way of feeding our cattle.
For us, a culled carrot is anything that's crooked, deformed, it might have a bug mark. We do donate quite a few to food banks, but they can't use up the volumes that we have. If a crooked carrot is in the bag, the consumer won't buy that bag. They think they will, but when they actually go to pick up a bag off the shelf, anything that has that crooked carrot or something that doesn't look just right, people won't buy it.
When you go down that road of vegetables, crops, and cattle, we have a living example on our farm of exactly that. So we grow sweet corn. The sweet corn goes to the plant, gets processed. We take back the husks and the kernels and the ears that are discarded, and we feed that back to the cattle. The manure comes out of the cattle, goes onto the field, fertilizes it for next year's crop. So the whole system just works really, really well.
It's hard to quantify the total amount of food loss and waste that is diverted from landfills as feed for cattle, but research conducted in the US estimates it at 43 billion kilograms. That's the equivalent of around 195 cargo ships of food loss and waste fed to cattle each year.
It's an improvement in efficiency because we're not wasting those products. We're repurposing them for use in animal diets. That recycling or upcycling utility of ruminant animals is really a global societal good. It's ensuring that we're able to meet the requirements not only of those people around us and in our immediate communities and families, but that we're also making efficient use of crop and animal source foods that are produced worldwide.
While a significant amount of food waste and food loss can be upcycled by cattle, the ingredients and types of foods are regulated and approved by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to ensure both the health of the animals and food safety. The global community has set its sights on targeted methane reductions in a big way over the next decade, with many countries aiming for a 30% reduction in emissions by the year 2030. Cattle have the potential to divert roughly 860,000 tons of food from landfills in Canada every year, helping to decrease methane emissions. But are we getting ahead by using a methane-producing animal to solve a methane problem? It's critical that we take the time to understand how cattle's relationship to the carbon cycle and the methane cycle works.
In Canada, most of our CO2 emissions, our carbon dioxide emissions, are from the use of fossil fuel. With methane from cows, it's part of a biological cycle.
Methane is a potent but short-lived greenhouse gas. It's emitted from various sources, including fossil fuel extraction, landfills, wetlands, and from ruminant animals, including cattle. Cattle can digest plants like grasses and crop byproducts that humans simply cannot. And as a result of this digestion, cattle emit methane through belches. And this methane is part of a natural cycle called the biogenic carbon cycle. So plants trap carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during photosynthesis. Cattle eat these plants and emit methane into the atmosphere. But after about 12 years, the methane is converted back to carbon dioxide and absorbed by plants, starting the whole cycle over again. This means that if the methane emissions remain constant over time, methane will be destroyed at the same rate that it's produced. And this is actually true for Canada, for biogenic methane, because the number of cattle in Canada have been stable. So in Canada, most of our greenhouse gas emissions are from the use of fossil fuels. When we burn this ancient carbon, it goes into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, and it stays there for hundreds and even thousands of years. So this is not a cycle, but a one-way street with a long-standing impact on our climate.
It's abundantly clear that food waste in Canada is a significant challenge that will require collaborative problem solving across the entire food chain.
Being a small business owner and part of our community, anytime that we can share what we no longer need with somebody and make it useful so that we don't create waste, we just create more opportunities and better relationships, that's the kind of stuff that gets us really excited here.
With a coordinated and innovative approach, the opportunity to create big impacts in greenhouse gas reduction while tackling hunger in our communities is not outside our reach.
We currently produce enough food to feed a population of 10 billion people if that food was perfectly distributed to those people that need it and those individuals actually consume it. We overproduce food in our developed countries, and as a result, we don't value the necessity of that food the same way that it would be if we didn't produce sufficient quantities. We can look at food waste as a challenge that's potentially insurmountable because it's this really complex socioeconomic manifestation of human behavior. But we can also look at it as a huge opportunity where if we could fix this problem, if we could sort out this challenge, all of a sudden our challenge of feeding the growing global population becomes much more achievable.
Reduce, Reuse, Ruminate. I hope everyone enjoyed that screening. It will be available on YouTube later today, of course, in recognition of Stop Food Waste Day, which is being recognized today, April 24th. So now we'll move into our panel discussion. Similar to what we heard in the film about solving this issue of food waste needing to really be a collaborative effort, that's what we're trying to bring to you today with our esteemed panelists. So we have primary producers, researchers, and representatives from food production with us today. So panelists, if you want to turn your cameras on. First up is, I'd love to introduce everyone to Bob Lowe. Bob is the past president of the Canadian Cattle Association and current president of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. He is a feedlot producer from Nanton, Alberta, and we're so happy that you can join us today, Bob. Next up is Dr. Kim Ominski. Kim is joining us from the University of Manitoba and has been very involved in research in many facets of the beef industry, and including the ability of livestock and ruminants to upcycle food waste. So a great expert to have with us today. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kim Ominski. And as well, in a similar vein, we are so happy to have Stephanie Terry joining us today. She is a scientific researcher at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, currently working on a producer survey looking at the upcycling of byproducts and food waste with cattle. So really excited to hear from your perspective, Stephanie, and the work that's happening. And then rounding out our panel is John McQuarrie. John is with Cavendish Farms, who I believe almost everyone on this call, of course, will know their great potato products, French fries and hash browns. He is the Director of Environmental Sustainability for Cavendish, and before that has worked as a Deputy Minister of Transportation. John is usually located in Charlottetown, PEI, but is in Southern Alberta today. So thanks so much for joining us, John, and thanks to everyone on the panel. So we'll jump right into it. I see we've already got some questions happening in the Q&A, so keep them coming. We'll be throwing those to our panelists at the end. Our first question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, in the film, we heard about some examples of byproducts, food loss, and food waste being fed to livestock. Based on your research, could you explain to us how much of a role cattle play in upcycling these products in Canada?
Yes, thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. So I think the video did a fantastic job of showing the very important role of beef cattle in upcycling of both food loss and food waste. We know that at different capacities, beef cattle producers are incorporating a range of different food loss and waste into their feed rations. Something very important that was, highlighted was that currently we're really only modelling to capture the current volume of food loss and waste that is currently diverted into cattle diets. So we have a project starting. So the Canadian Cattle Association has funded a project through the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, also known as the Cluster, to allow us to try and estimate the current volume of food loss and waste that is being directed into cattle feed. So I'm leading a project between myself, Dr. Kim Ominski, and Dr. Kim Stanford at the University of Lethbridge, to try and better understand the current inventory of byproducts, co-products, and organic waste available through both processors, so some of the examples we talked about today, as well as the grocery stores. So this can be anything from bakery products, potatoes, breweries, to vegetables that are not sold in stores. So you already mentioned one aspect of this project is that we want to conduct a survey that should hopefully be live within the next couple of months. And we'll be sharing that to different processors in order to try and capture both the current and the potential capacity that food loss is and could be utilised by beef cattle to avoid that high value food ending up in the landfill and getting wasted. As the second component of this, we are working with Loop Resources to try and estimate, again, the current and potential use of grocery store waste for cattle feed as well. So we'll be doing, a few trials here and there. We'll be looking at potentially ensiling some of the food waste, as well as looking at animal trials to evaluate not only the effect on productivity, but also on the methane emissions of the animals when we feed these types of products. Because I think, as mentioned in this video, that's also an important aspect as well. So that's one area of research that's currently happening at the moment. And I'm sure Kim will expand upon that in some of her responses to the questions today.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Sounds like a really great project. I'm excited, of course, to see the results. Through the Holland White paper in the US, we have that great statistic of the 43 billion kilograms is what they estimated is being upcycled by livestock just south of us. So it'll be so amazing to have, updated metrics and stats specific to Canada. So awesome. We will move on to Bob. Question for you, Bob. In the film, we saw brewers' grains, we saw carrots, we saw potato byproducts being fed to cattle. In your experience as a feedlot operator, someone who's been to a lot of operations around Canada as well, what food waste byproducts are common ingredients for cattle? Is it easy to incorporate that into a ration? And if you could comment on the nutritional value that it provides.
Sure, Amy. And thank you for the introduction. It probably, and there's no science behind this, potatoes are probably the most common byproduct, what people would classify as a edible byproduct fed to cattle, and they've been doing that for years, and it's just called potatoes. Potatoes are mostly starch, which really aids in the process of fattening cattle for human consumption. The other things, we fed a lot of fruit and vegetables because they asked us if we could, and I said sure, and we just mixed them up, and you saw the loader going back and forth, just mixing everything. What the nutritional value actually was, I don't know. It'd be, I expect, very good in vitamins and minerals. And much to what Ryan said, we had nutritionists test this every week. The only problem with fruit and vegetables is a lot of it's water, so it just goes away. But there's other things, dried distillers grains. We feed a lot of dried distillers grains from the ethanol industry, that's a very, very good source of protein for cattle. When you feed corn, which we feed corn as well, corn is low in protein, so dried distillers grain, either wheat or from corn maybe, adds the protein to the ration just for more efficiency.
I'd love to hear just a little bit more, Bob, about how you work with your nutritionist, how often you're contacting them, their role on a feedlot business, and just a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, we use a company, and once a week they come out and they take samples of everything that we're feeding, plus samples of the total ration, and they analyze them for everything. Are they safe? Would be number one, safe for feeding to cattle. The nutritional content. I've always said if I fed myself and my family as balanced a ration as we feed the cattle, we'd be superhumans. It's very, very much involved. You don't want to feed too much of any one thing for economic reasons, and you don't want to feed too little, I guess, for the same reasons. It's in today's world of producing food, it's become very scientific, and nutritionists, we're talking about cattle, but nutritionists are a valuable part of our program, as in our farming operation, agrologists have become a very valuable part. Just because the science is there. There's way too much of it for any one person to know. So you hire the people that you need to do the best job you can do.
I think it would surprise people not involved in, raising beef cattle that there are these specialized, essentially dietitians for beef cattle. But like you said, they're quite complex diets that the animals are eating. And to get the amounts right and the vitamins and minerals and everything in balance, enough protein, it is quite a science. So thanks for highlighting that for us. Next up, we'll go to John. John, as someone who represents Cavendish Farms, I'd love to hear, what are some of the unavoidable byproducts of processing potatoes, and how does Cavendish work to divert those items?
Thanks very much for the introduction, Amy. As you pointed out, I work on sustainability planning for Cavendish Farms. We're a processor of frozen French fried potato products with operations in Canada, the United States, and to put in perspective, we're the 4th largest in North America. And I'm really, really proud to say that the byproducts that come out the back of our processing facilities, none of it ends up in landfill, and it either goes in one of two directions. It either goes to feeding cattle. Such as, I'm in Lethbridge today, and virtually all of our byproduct from our facility here goes to feeding cattle, or it goes to produce renewable energy through anaerobic digestion. It's really, really important to us, to have outlets, for those byproducts, that ensure that we're not putting material into the landfill. And if you think about a French fry, that you either buy at your local store or your local, quick service restaurant. Typically, it doesn't have a skin. So when we, bring potatoes in, we use steam peeling to take the peels off, which become a byproduct. We deliver, product, to some customers that have very strict standards. And so, off-grade potatoes, off-grade, finished French fries that just don't meet the grade, have to go somewhere. And there's always a little bit of oil mixed in it too, because we par fry material before it goes to customers. So it's a combination of peels, of bruised potatoes, French fries that don't meet spec, and a little bit of oil all combined together, and that's what we send out to the back of our plants. And then on theme with today's discussion, a very significant quantity of it goes to feeding cattle, and we're proud of that.
I always think, John, there's nothing cooler than seeing French fries become your hamburger, essentially, feeding into that, It's such a perfect food pairing of French fries and hamburgers, and what an interesting story on the back end as well. So thank you so much for that. This question is both for Kim and John. So Kim, we'll go to you first. If you could talk about the value that cattle provide as an upcycling stream to the sustainability of Canadian agriculture.
Thanks very much, Amy, for the opportunity to be here today. And, certainly, as the other speakers have referred to, and as we heard about in this video, that there's tremendous opportunity in terms of upcycling products that are no longer or that are not available, but not desirable from a human consumption perspective, in that they're off quality in some way, shape, or form, visually, specifically, and to use them to upcycle to produce this high quality beef, both high in protein and high in micronutrients. And there's tremendous advantages in doing that, not only from a feed security perspective in providing more feed for cattle, particularly in light of climate change, where we know that feed resources could become more challenging, but also in terms of environmental sustainability. And we are in the process of looking at sort of two case scenarios. One of those is looking at feeding cull potatoes, and the other one is looking at feeding bread byproducts. And in both scenarios, we've examined, what are the environmental impacts in terms of land and water use, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and in terms of ammonia emissions. And in both cases, we've seen a reduction in all of those environmental metrics with feeding cull potatoes compared to a standard diet. So, not only are we improving, as I said, we can at least have comparable productivity from animals, but certainly we can have tremendous environmental impacts by using food waste as part of our livestock diets.
And same question over to you, John. So, we've heard that the Lethbridge processing facility, really relies on cattle for diverting any of those unavoidable byproducts. But if you could just speak to, specifically the value that they provide as that upcycling stream, and potentially if there wasn't cattle to send it to, what would happen to those products?
We really value the relationships that we've grown with cattle producers over the years, and it's important to us. So as a factory that we operate 24/7, and we have material that doesn't meet grade specs or whatever that's being produced constantly every day, and so we need an outlet. And for us, the value of having that material go to either produce renewable energy or to raise cattle, it's really, really important. And apart from being the right thing to do for the environment, and I work for a values-driven organization, and they are focused on doing good for the environment. Customers pay attention too, and our customers want to know as much as they want to know about the quality of the French fry that we're delivering to them. They want to know the story behind it, and they're asking us, what are we doing with waste and byproduct, and what are we doing for sustainability, and how are we working with the farmers? So it's an important part of our story, and once again, we're very proud of the fact that we've got a great story. So it's a very important. I can't put a dollar figure on it, but if we didn't have your cattle feeders as an outlet, I think we'd be stuck trying to figure out what we were going to do, because it's quite a significant volume that we produce every day.
And so similar to that, John, we saw in the film, Ryan Casco, he has a feedlot down in Lethbridge where you are today, and actually, does have that relationship with Cavendish. Could you talk about how Cavendish finds beef producers that they'll work with, and kind of how those relationships are established?
Well, it's a mutual, beneficial relationship. I mean, we're providing a source of feed, to Ryan as an example, and then he's giving us an outlet, for our byproduct. And I recall when we had Ryan speaking on our panel in Calgary, he pointed out that there are some challenges for him, because we're producing that byproduct 24/7, right? And so it means that, as a cattle producer, he has to have the means and the capacity, to come to our facility, to pick this material up and take it away. So that's kind of a special relationship, right? I mean, we need to know that we have a reliable outlet, and having those relationships that really have been built over years and a long term, it just makes our business easier, and it does for him too, because ultimately, waste is a cost, and it's important for us, to think about how can we minimize cost, and working with reliable partners is critically important to us. So it's I know that he has some challenges because of the time when we produce material, but he's stepping up as an example, and we really value that relationship, and it's a feel good thing for us too, understanding that what theoretically could be a waste is gone to upcycle and produce additional food for humans.
And for yourself, Bob, I know you've had different relationships, whether you're getting dry distiller grains or whether you're getting fruit, vegetables, and cull potatoes. So love to hear from you how you've kind of established those connections for either businesses or producers that are looking to do something similar. You're on mute, Bob.
I am, so my computer told me that too. In a nutshell, we're always looking for alternate feed sources. That's just the way the industry is. And with the wholesaler that we met with, I heard a rumor that they wanted to get rid of stuff. I just went up and visited with them, and we're talking potatoes. And at the end of the conversation, he says, "Do you know anybody that would be interested in all these vegetables? We have about 10 to 15 tons of vegetables, fruit and vegetables every week as well." And I said, well, give them to me. I didn't know any better. So I just said, well, I'll take them too. It filled the truck. It made the logistics easier. And then, we just threw them in a pile and mixed them. The dried distillers grains are another thing too. They came along, their cost per, I guess, unit of protein makes them very economical to feed. Then we're always looking for ways to make cattle more economical to raise. And there was another thing that just slipped my mind. So I'm not sure just what it was. I may get back to it.
You just let us know when it circles back. Yep.
I got it, Amy. The cow, the rumen of a cow is a very unique thing, and it's got the ability of taking something that humans either can't eat or won't eat and turn it into a very high quality protein and nutritious food. And that's the benefits of a rumen, and it's kind of our obligation to use that rumen to its maximum capacity.
I think too, one of the interesting things that's come out of the work in this is that there are also business opportunities to kind of be that connecting piece between whether it's manufacturers or breweries. So we've had some examples recently. Kim was talking about Loop Resources, which is a company that is across Canada and is looking to really connect grocery stores with farmers and ranchers, and whether that's cattle as livestock or, other types like pigs, and connecting them to their grocery shrink. So items that, just won't make the specifications for consumers, whether that's, visually they're not appealing, like we heard before, crooked carrots or bruised potatoes, things like that. And so Loop Resources is a really great example of being that connector piece. Another one that's an Alberta company is called Agro Systems, and they're really looking to make connections between breweries and farmers and ranchers. So they're picking up the product, then they're delivering it on farm, and so kind of taking some of the logistical headaches out of it. So just wanted to highlight that there's lots of opportunities, and I'm sure as we hear more out of Stephanie, your research, just really identifying what those potential opportunities look like and how to capitalize on it so that we're really working to reduce food waste and make the best use of it as possible. So in that, I've got one closing question before we go to some of the great questions we've got in the Q&A. And that's just really, why is reducing food waste important to you? And I'd love to go to Stephanie first.
I guess for me, the most important aspect is, we compare enteric methane from ruminants contributes about 3.3% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions, compared to food waste, which is about 20%. We have a lot of focus on cattle, and they provide a pivotal service for us, providing high quality protein. Whereas we have food waste that just, we have this already available solution that we need to utilize and investigate to try and reduce some of that, large 20% of greenhouse gases emitted through food waste. So that's my importance for food waste.
Love that. Bob, we'll go to you next. Well, why is reducing food waste important to you? You might still be on mute, Bob.
I am. I was at a conference a few years ago, and somebody it was WWF in the US was presenting. And at that time, according to their numbers, if we could reduce food waste by, I think it was 50% globally, we would be 75% of our way to curing hunger. Now, there's a whole lot of other distribution factors and stuff in the way. But when you're issued a challenge that you have to produce, more food in the next 20 years than we've produced since barley became domesticated, you're going to take any way you can to figure out how to do that, because that's kind of an impossible challenge to meet. So food waste is we can lessen that. That's a huge way of meeting our obligation to feed the planet.
Great comment. Kim, we'll go to you next. And just why is reducing food waste important to you?
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy. I think that on a personal level, each of us can identify with the need to reduce food waste, and it certainly is a call to action to all of us individually. I think people are looking for something to do to improve the environmental sustainability of the planet, and food waste is a great avenue by which we can do that. From the livestock sector's perspective, not only, when we reduce food waste, we are improving really feed security for the livestock sector. We're improving food security for the human population, and we're also reducing the environmental footprint. And so I think this day is really a call to action for all of us, both on a personal level and, from an industry perspective, to think about how, we talked about nutritionists and the role that they play both for animals and for humans. We talk about, cattle producers have always been very resourceful at looking at using byproducts, and certainly the opportunities for the industry are really expanding. And as I said, it's a call to action for all of us to work together, nutritionists, distributors, producers, in order to eliminate food waste and improve both the food security and the feed security for our country.
And we'll go to John last but not least. John, love to hear why food waste, reducing it is important to you.
Well, there are a couple of reasons, Amy, and first of all, it's just hard-nosed economics. I mean, it's in our best interest to minimize the amount of product that can't be sold for human consumption, and so we work hard at that. And there's all kinds of neat things that we do to take some product that historically would be waste and we turn it into something usable. So that's the economic side. But I think on the environmental side, which is becoming more and more important, we work hard to think about what can we do to minimize our impact on the environment. What can we do, to make sure that we're not impacting climate change any more than necessary? Measure greenhouse gas and thinking about waste and our Scope 3 emissions. So it all comes into play. So it's a combination of a growing world with a hungry population, a shrinking land base. So we need to be smart about how we feed people. There's an economic side, and climate change is really, really coming to the fore. And so we're thinking about all aspects of the business and what we can do to minimize greenhouse gas results.
Great, thanks, John. We'll go to our questions from the audience. So thanks everyone for putting these into the Q&A portion. Our first question is from Tina, and this will be for both John and Bob. It's, is the food or food processing byproduct tested before being given to cattle? Is there a need to check for spoilage? So I'll send that over to you first, John, to maybe talk from the processing angle.
Well, the good news is that virtually everything that comes into our plant is, meets your stringent standards, so it can be consumed by humans, and that really, that the whole process carries on from the front right to the back. So we're not producing anything that theoretically couldn't be consumed by humans. But to be specific, do we test it again before it goes to the feedlots? The answer to that question is, well, no, we don't. But the assumption is that with all the systems in place, that it would be safe, and it is safe.
And then I know you commented on this a little bit, Bob, about the nutritionist coming on farm kind of once a week, testing all of the ingredients, looking at safety first, and then really formulating a robust and balanced ration second. But any other comments that you have on, checking for spoilage or anything that you're looking for before you incorporate it into the ration?
I guess the best thing that I can say is for 2 years, and we have a fairly sizable operation at home with about 15 or 18 employees. None of ourselves, our families, or our employees had to buy any fruit or vegetables for probably the last 2 years. It all, when the potato truck showed up, everybody showed up and they got their week's supply of basically their potatoes and fruit and vegetables right out of the tote bags. That's got to be as good a way, and we're all still alive and healthy. So I think that's about as good a test as there is.
I can also provide anecdotal evidence on that, as I took limes and ginger home from your feedlot, and they worked amazing in both a rye and coke and a stir fry recipe. So thank you for those. Second question out of the chat is from a current PhD student at the University of Alberta who's working on methane emissions and carbon sequestration in beef cattle, focusing more so on a cow-calf sector, so farms that are raising calves and then selling them on. He says that, when attending sustainability seminars, that there is a common thread of attacking cattle production. The question is, how do we educate the public on the positive roles of cattle production in the ecosystem? And I'd love to throw this to Kim first, if I could, please.
Yeah, Amy, so thanks for this question. I think that one of the challenges that we have, and we're all mindful of, is that the many people have never had, the privilege of being on a farm, never mind growing up on a farm. And so that opportunity to dialogue with producers about cattle production systems is very limited for many people. And as Steph has said, that cattle produce 3.3% of emissions, and Karen also commented on the video that really the biggest contributor to emissions, which we can all make a difference about, is energy, carbon dioxide emissions, and primarily from fossil fuel use. So I think again that's a message that we need to share. But the other thing I think we really need to think about is this opportunity for dialoguing. As I said before, many people have never had the chance to be on a farm. And so just the opportunity to dialogue with people, I mean, it's not a one-way delivery of let me tell you. It's really about, let's talk about this. It's a shared value. I think we all have interest, no matter who we are, in the global sustainability of our planet. And, there's many opportunities to be able to do that. I think, we here at the University of Manitoba have the Farm and Food Discovery Center, and it's a hands-on learning center. And it's open all year round, but on one day of the year, we can attract in about 4 or 5 hours anywhere between about 900 and 1,600 people. That's kind of been the attendance over the last number of years. And that I think is evidence to us to demonstrate that people really just want to know. They want the opportunity for dialogue about, and they want information about it. So I think for all of us, there's many, many opportunities in which we can engage at that level. Ag in the classroom is another opportunity. You talked about, the video Guardians of the Grassland. So I think there's many places where we can all engage on a personal level, but also as, commodity groups, universities, and government agencies to have that opportunity to dialogue with the public.
Amy, could I add to that?
You sure can.
It's just, I just think that that's a really great question, and sometimes I get so frustrated because people look at the cattle industry with negatively to think about methane production, but regenerative agriculture is it's a term that's becoming more and more used, and it's really, when you think about it, it's all about building soil capacity and building soil health. And one of the key pillars of regenerative agriculture is incorporating animal agriculture. So, from Cavendish Farms' perspective, when we look at cattle producers, it's not just an outlet, for a byproduct, but it's a synergistic relationship, because, I think about, Prince Edward Island, for example, we've got a manure deficit. Our farmers would love to have more cattle available, to provide, manures, because it's important, to add it, to build soil health. Cattle production also creates the opportunity for potato producers, to grow alternate crops. I mean, you can't grow potatoes year after year after year, or you'll get into trouble. So growing those alternate crops, particularly crops for feed, are important. So the cattle industry creates an opportunity for potato farmers to grow alternate crops to feed cattle. So it's really a circular economy. So I think you really need to look at the larger picture of where cattle fit into to a sustainable agriculture system, and not just to produce their methane.
Thanks for those, John. That's it's something that we're involved in, day in, day out, trying to raise awareness of these positive roles of beef cattle. We found success in short documentaries. It seems to be a medium that people are looking for information in, but also allows you enough time, to go into detail a bit about the issues, but framing it in a way that the average person understands and cares about, and so I know that's why focusing on things that are on people's minds, like food waste, and then tying that to the role of cattle is something that we've tried to do, as well as working with media and influencers and others with sort of platforms that are more public potentially than the beef community might have, trying to get that out there. But we're always open to suggestions as well on how we can help Canadians learn just, the many positive things that cattle can do for us, both in the environment and as a society. So last question that we have here is for Bob. It's from Mike, who was one of our great participants in the short documentary from Ontario. He wants to know if you can comment about any foreign materials that are coming in some of the byproducts that you're getting delivered. And how do you maintain quality from your suppliers, so that you're hopefully not finding any of these foreign materials coming in through the products?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and thanks for the question, Mike. Really, the only thing that we've found is plastic bags. The feed truck has magnets on it, so if there's any steel, it will be stopped before it gets to the cattle. But what we've seen in the fruit and vegetable, in particular the vegetables and potatoes and things, was just the odd little bit will come in plastic bags. And we'll get a few loaves of bread that are in bread bags, which are fairly easy to see and pull out. But other than that has not been a problem at all. I'd like to just make a comment to that last question too, Amy, if you'll allow me to.
Please do.
As producers, we have a role to be completely open, completely transparent, and completely honest in everything we do. We need to build trust with 2 or 3% of us produce all the food. We need to build trust with the other 97%. And it's our obligation. I mean, we can produce the best beef in the world, but if people decide they don't want to eat it, we don't get to produce it anymore. So all of the rest of the stuff becomes, to me, on the back burner. You need the science in your pocket, but we need to convince people that we're doing this. We feed this stuff to our families, so it's perfectly okay.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and I think, with the understanding that farmers and ranchers are the most trusted voice in the food system, we continually see that in research and in surveys. Who do Canadians want to hear from? They really want to hear from farmers and ranchers, and then, of course, researchers and others in the food system as well. So all of us together, really collaborating on these stories is hopefully going to reach Canadians who are interested and want to know more. So with that, we'll close our presentation. We're right on time. So just wanted to say a big thank you, of course, to our esteemed panelists. So Kim, Stephanie, John, and Bob, thank you so much for your time today, your comments, sharing your expertise with us. It's really appreciated. And then also a big thank you to everyone that joined us. We're really excited about the launch of the short documentary and happy to share it with you. If you're interested in sharing the short film, watching it again, it's going to be available on YouTube later today. You can find it on the Raising Canadian Beef channel. And of course, I'll put my email on screen. Feel free to send me an email if you have any follow-up questions, follow-up comments. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you a wonderful rest of your day.